Hello and welcome to Steve and Dave's 50 Years Ago this month. This is our year-end edition from 1974. We're going to do this in two parts. There's a lot to get through here, so we're going to break it down. Our first session is going to be January through July. January through June, and we're going to get started with that right now. So we've spent the last 12 months, talking about the singles charts, Billboard Hot 100. And this time we're just going to talk about some other things that were going on during the year, musically, of course, but the emphasis is not going to be on the singles this time around, and a few other things that were happening culturally, politically, etc. Steve, how we want to start this off?
Well, I guess we'll just start off at the beginning, right? It's January 2nd, 74, and the federal government gets serious about fuel efficiency
Uh-oh.
by making 55 miles an hour the maximum speed limit on all highways, not just federal. So
It's like they
states
were
can't.
anticipating Jimmy.
Yes, they were. Um, of course, there was tremendous pushback across the country, but particularly in the western states,
Oh,
who
jeez.
where
55
the
miles
where
per hour is deadly in the western states. It's
it's
just,
almost true. It was,
wow.
yeah, the speed limit was not enforced. It was loosely enforced in many states, but particularly in the West. My question for you is this. So if the 55 mile an hour speed limit was put into effect on the 2nd of January 1974, how long was it, in fact, the law of the land? When did that get repealed? I was a little surprised.
It seems to me that it was in effect for a long time.
It was a long time. It
That
wasn't.
might have been subjective, but I'm thinking it survived into the 90s.
Almost. It was repealed in the 87, so it made it into Reagan's second term. But
Okay.
yeah, but I mean, a long time, and certainly a lot longer than the so-called energy crisis. Again, this was the crisis was perceived as sort of the crisis of the moment. It probably shouldn't have been, but so there we go. So that's how we start
Yeah,
off.
ask Club of Rome.
Yeah, I mean, it. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of embarrassing to look at some of the steps and missteps that the country made in this era regarding energy issues. The person who probably was most in touch with all that was one Jimmy Carter, who was derided, just mercilessly derided for his approach to energy conservation and his proposals to, augment wind and solar, put the solar
There's
panels on
solar
the White
panels
House and
on the
all
White House, right?
all that.
Yeah.
And he was seen as a kind of buffoon, even by Democrats. Um, anyway, that's how we start
That's how we treat our
74.
visionaries in America. Yeah,
Well, there's
that's how we
something
do
there's
it.
something to that. All right, so that's January 2nd of 74. Um, on the 15th of the month,
Oh, just a second. We had something
wait, well, I thought it
significant
was,
going on in the music industry.
there we go.
Bob Dylan, the man, and the band.
Hmm.
They began their 40 date concert tour in Chicago Stadium. This is going to be his first tour since '66, and it's in support of the Planet Waves album, which is coming out a little bit later in the month.
Hmm. Yeah, it's Dylan had become a reclusive figure. There was a motorcycle accident and there were some other things, and he had only kind of appeared a handful of times. Concert of Bangladesh being one noteworthy exception, but right. So people were hungry to see Dylan, and I guess modestly hungry to see the band, and so yeah, and that
So that was that.
yeah, yeah. On the 15th of the month, ABC premieres a show which they had presented some 9 months earlier in a kind of sneak peek, but this is Happy Days premiere.
A
And
delightful
Happy,
series.
well, yeah, it is. It is a delightful series. I guess the
Until
question I'd
Fonzie
have for
jumps the
you,
shark.
Yeah, literally, yeah, well, literally and figuratively, all right. Um, so here's the cast in this initial season. From left to right, right, Ron Howard, um, Tom Bosley, Aaron Moran, um,
Who
the
the
woman
chick
on the
is the guy
right,
in the white?
who the check. So Marion Anderson on the right. Yeah, so the guy in the sweater vest on the tree is that's Chuck. Played here by Will Roberts. A couple of different actors played Chuck in the first couple of seasons. They never knew, the writers never knew what to do with Chuck, and so Chuck disappeared. And so this is it led to the sort of Chuck Cunningham situation where you have a character who is probably underdeveloped and maybe unnecessary, just being kind of vaporized
Not
from a
the first time
series.
and not the last time it's happened.
Not the first time, not the last time for sure. I guess though, what I wanted to point out here and be interested in your thoughts. 1974, or the 70s in general, but particularly the early 70s, a tremendous wave of nostalgia for the 50s. Um, I don't think we've ever really seen. I guess this is my question to you. Have we ever really seen this kind of nostalgia for a decade or an era with this kind of intensity? I mean, there was a real hunger for the 50s, a real, well, so your thoughts about that would be what? I mean,
My theory is um, that we have these nostalgia waves um, in approximately 20-year spans from the
Mhm.
era that's looked at. I remember um, in the 70s and in the 80s as a young man, I was a big fan of the 60s. I thought everything that happened in the 60s was neat and cool, and I wanted to know more about it. And so that in the 80s, looking back in the 60s and the 90s, we had that 70s show. Um,
Yeah, I mean, we did. I mean, but we did.
all right, it wasn't
We did.
it did not have the same it wasn't part of the same sort of cultural wave
I
that this
think that
was.
that's,
Because you're
I
definitely
think,
right. There was something about the 50s that clearly was ringing a bell with
yeah,
people
yeah,
in
and
the 70s.
it rang a bell for a long time, and so Happy Days is right in the middle of all that, but it was certainly not the only kind of cultural expression that
Well,
tapped into that.
uh, later this year, 74, Bill Haley and the Comets are going to have a top 40 hit again with Rock Around the Clock. Thank you, Ron Howard. Because
Well, yeah.
if Ron Howard had not been in American Graffiti and Happy Days and so on, that probably wouldn't have happened. So,
Well, right. I think you're absolutely right. And I guess if you were to put this 50s nostalgia wave at the foot of one person, it probably would be Ron Howard, who in his own way was at the eye of the storm, right? Whether it's American Graffiti or again, Happy Days. It was just kind of peculiar in a way, but there you have it. So Happy Days will run for a long time, but it gets started in mid-January of 74.
2 days later, big day for rock albums. On the 17th, Court and Spark was released. Joni
Yeah,
Mitchell's
yeah,
sixth
this is,
album, and it becomes her career bestseller.
oh, definitely. Yeah, this is her commercial zenith. Yeah, this is the most, probably one of the most accessible albums,
Well,
and
Help
yielded
Me
two big
is
singles.
the single off that, and I think that is also her most successful single. Um,
I would think that's probably right.
it's her only US top 10 single, and uh, clearly, I think probably all her stuff does better in Canada than it does in the US. But the point is, um, this was big. So this is maybe her zenith in terms of popularity.
Oh, I think that that's right.
Also on that day, Planet Waves, Bob Dylan, his first US #1 album, reached #7 in the UK.
Wait a minute. His first
His
U.S. number one
first
album.
#1 in the US, and it's his 14th studio album that he recorded in LA with the band, but it's the first to go to #1. Both of those were released on the 17th.
Okay. Gosh. Well, that's it. All right. So on the 22nd of January, there is an inaugural march, an anti-abortion march, the so-called National March for Life, which becomes well, it will evolve into one of the biggest events for conservative religious and political leaders for the next half century. That this will be a an event that somebody who's eyeing of the presidency from the conservative wing of particularly the Republican Party. This is where you have to be. And while there's only in this March in 74, the 22nd, is only maybe 6,000 people or so there. It will grow by leaps and bounds and will become, well, it'll become the most visible part of in many ways, the anti-abortion movement, a movement which will have, well, I mean, they'll hold together for a half century before Roe v. Wade is repealed. But again, this is a year out from Roe v. Wade, and it's of small beginnings, I guess. But it's remarkable how important this becomes, and
Do,
I mean, yeah.
do you see this sort of political activity, that the pro-life push, which was clearly identified with the right, with the Republicans?
Mhm.
Um, do you see that as maybe a spark plug for the religious right, as a start of the political movement towards moral majority and so on? Because up until then, there had not been well, the
Yeah, this is
religious
it.
right had been pretty much in
Well,
recluse, right? They were not
politically, I
getting
think
out on the
that's right.
street, right?
Yeah, I think. Well, right. I think that's absolutely right. I think that it was the spark. Roe v. Wade was the spark. I mean, there was tremendous anxiety and anger, I think, amongst social and religious conservatives about the 60s writ large. Um, but the Roe v. Wade was, yeah, this was the spark. And so this is leads to more political activism. I think, I mean, I think you're right. I mean, I think without this, I mean, I don't know. I mean, Roe, the moral majority, Falwell's influence. I mean, all of that I think is muted a bit. But man, it just took off. It became the rallying cry for a half century. I mean, it's
Oh, one
the
of the most reliable
relentless,
wedge issues that the Republicans had going for them.
no question. I mean, that's absolutely right. And
I
you
think
know,
probably still was getting Republicans elected in 2016. I
oh,
think Trump
I think
is has his
that's
first
right.
presidency to thank because of
No question.
abortion.
No question about that. And I think as this seemed, I mean, to the notion of repealing Roe v. Wade in 1974 just seemed like an incredible long shot. I mean, this is what these people are calling for. Well, I mean, they see it through. I mean, a remarkable kind of effort that involved lots of people and lots of think tanks and lots of money. But
Well, about a half century
they,
is
right.
right.
That's the long game.
That's the long
That's
game.
and
The
but it
funny part
starts.
about it, and the ironic thing for me, is that this was a successful thing for them. It was a great wedge issue for them. And since they have been successful, since Roe v. Wade was actually reversed, the backlash and the political
Well,
it's been so toxic for the Republican Party. I find that very strange and very ironic.
it's it's the old maybe it's the old dog catches the car kind of thing. Because every I mean you were always you were always chasing. You were always but once you become I guess the prey. It's interesting. Yeah, it's a curious era for sure, but all this gets started on the 22nd with the National March for Life, which will become an enormous thing.
On the 30th, the album "The Way We Were" by Barbra
Yes,
Streisand, the
yes.
soundtrack to the movie that she made with Robert Redford,
Mhm.
and the single from the album, uh, was the number one single of the year.
Oh, it's absolutely the case. Yeah.
So it was huge. It was really big.
As was the Streisand Redford pairing. Now, there was plenty of chatter, critical chatter about that movie, but America was enthralled with the notion of Babs and Redford on screen. Always with the hope that somehow it would go farther than that. But yeah, a big record. I mean, Barbra Streisand in the 70s. Um, it's important. It's an important decade for her, and she has a tremendous amount of success.
Started in the late 60s, but yes, she's she's surprisingly charismatic um, in her
What do you
movie
mean,
roles.
support? Well, okay. Oh, well,
I just
yeah.
I just find her absolutely charming in most of the things that I've seen her in.
Well, which makes The Way We Were, I think. I mean, because you're right. I mean, like something like What's Up, Doc, or even something like Yentl, or even the that boxing movie. Oh,
Oh,
jeez.
I have, yeah, with Ryan uh
With
Ryan O'Neal.
I think
Wasn't
that's
that?
right. I think that's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, there's a certain kind of charm, and she kind of just jumps off
Well,
the
What's Up
screen.
Doc was also Ryan O'Neal. So they paired up a couple times.
Ricky Schroeder was in that
No,
as the
you're thinking about
kid.
the Champ. You're thinking about the Champ with John Voight.
You are correct, sir. All right. Main event,
The Main Event. Oh, very good. Yeah,
which was a
that's
bit,
right.
God, this is great. These two old guys sitting around eating pudding. But yeah, so I mean, surprisingly charismatic. I mean, yeah, she had real star appeal. No question about it.
Let me just while we're talking about albums, a few more albums came out during January. One of them was Sundown from Gordon Lightfoot.
Oh God.
We've talked extensively
Oh,
about that song.
so
Um,
dark.
yeah, so you can find out more about that in our song stories. Rhapsody in White, the Love Unlimited
Yeah.
Orchestra
Oh, of
came out,
course. Oh,
and Grievous Angel.
that's a little Graham Parsons for
Graham
you.
Parsons, yeah, compiled from his 73 sessions with, among others, um, Emmylou Harris,
Emmylou Harris. Yeah, yeah.
who was
Streets of Baltimore. Yeah.
an important musical partner for him in the time leading up to his death.
Absolutely. That's right.
The album was released posthumously after he OD'd while visiting his new home in the Joshua Tree
Yeah, well, we won't
Park. Basically, he just loved it
but
there.
yeah, but the story of how that all happened and what happened to his corpse and all that is really quite astounding.
It's
Um,
yeah,
but
it's
yes,
strange. But
but
he overdosed on alcohol and morphine.
it's
So
he he really carried the torch for country rock. And he had,
cosmic American music,
yeah,
cosmic
that's right. That
American music.
that, that was his great phrase. Um, but whether, influencing Keith Richards or his own time in the Flying Burrito Brothers or the Byrds, I mean, he's an important figure um, whose life was,
I've never
cut
really
short.
enjoyed, well,
Well,
certainly
no, I
after,
think that's fair. No, he never
after the
really.
Byrds' commercial success evaded him.
Oh,
Uh,
yeah, well,
critically,
right.
the critics continued to love on him, but he just wasn't selling many records.
No, no, he wasn't. And but in retrospect, he seems like one of those people that is pivotal, I think, for a number of levels. Yeah.
Well,
Uh,
when you see what his contemporaries thought of him and the people who wanted to work with him, um,
well,
it's pretty clear.
I, famously, you're absolutely right, right? It's Keith Richards, right, who saw him as a kind of kindred spirit, a person who was, who was just in it for the music. Um,
The
Yeah, I mean,
music
it's
and the
sort of,
drugs, yeah,
well, I mean, those things seem to sort of, yeah, be intertwined when it came to Graham Parsons and Keith Richards,
and Keith
for
Richards,
sure.
yeah.
Yeah.
All right, well,
All
that's
right.
all I
Let's
have to
get
say
to,
about
yeah,
January.
let's gets us to February then. So
February 1st, boom,
go ahead.
right from the start, we have Van Morrison's double live album. It's Too Late to Start Now.
Mhm.
Is released, and this is considered certainly Van Morrison at his peak as a live performer, and many people consider it one of the finest live albums ever. So there's that.
Right.
Um, and also on the first, what were once vices are now habits
This
by
is an
the Doobie
interesting
Brothers.
album. Yeah.
Also came out
Yeah.
on the first.
Doobie Brothers albums are there's a lot there. Um, there's a lot there. It's a group that flirted with a lot of different styles, right? And I think this album in particular is a kind of breakthrough for them. So I just want to mention that February 4th, and we've mentioned this before, but it's worth noting here. On February 4th, in young heiress Patty Hearst was in her Berkeley apartment with her then boyfriend Stephen Weed. People kicked the door, and then she's kidnapped by the Sudanese Liberation Army, the SLA. And for the next year and a half or so, Patty Hearst goes through a kind of transformation um, from um, from kidnappee to revolutionary, participating in, among other things, a bank robbery. And it's an odd story, of course, as we know, and we'll talk about down the road. She is captured on the 18th of September 75, tried and convicted, and then will be pardoned. It's by one Jimmy Carter. It's as curious a story as there is in the 20th century. And there just seems to be, I don't know. It's always struck me that there really hasn't been a full accounting of all of this, and I think I am not alone in that, right? That there's just something about all this that doesn't quite add up. But there's no question, right, that I mean, in February, this was the dominant news story that we had not seen high profile kidnappings like this in the United States, and here we have this kid, right, this college student, and then but it goes in a very interesting direction very, very quickly. But Patty Hearst kidnapping, well, it's just odd. There's just I
Well,
don't know how else to say it.
one of the things that makes it interesting is the response
Oh
of
God.
her
Well,
parents, especially of her father.
oh, that's for sure.
And I just have to wonder if that wasn't part of her radicalization in the end. It
Well,
might have done the job for me. Anyway,
he was resistant, right? We'll say resistant. I mean, he's loaded, but and the SLA was calling upon him to deliver right millions in terms of a kind of ransom, also in terms of food aid and whatnot, and to become, to sort of change his ways. I mean, publicly. And he was, as they say, resistant to do that, and looking to kind of bargain. And and yeah, it was, hmm, yeah, it was odd. Everything about this is strange, including, right, Patty Hearst's kind of post-kidnapping life, where she is, among other things, an actress. She's on TV. She's in John Waters films. Today, she breeds show dogs with some success. It's I, I don't. It's just
I
weird.
think there needs to be a little bit of compassion for her father because growing up,
Oh, here we go.
uh, his father loved his snow sled more than his son, and so
That's yeah. That's. I
that's
mean,
got
the
to be
Hearst.
hard to deal with.
That got to be hard. I mean, the Hearsts, yeah, for much of the 20th century, if not most of the 20th century, were sort of the one of the families that got a lot of attention. And like you're suggesting here, obliquely, this is the subject matter for Orson Welles' Citizen Kane and all of that. Um, they have faded from view, right, as the importance of newspapers and changes in times and personalities and whatnot. But
Although
there
yellow
was,
journalism is back on the rise.
well, listen, what's old is new again, and so I mean, yeah. So Patty Hearst again kidnapped on the 4th of February gets us on. What else is going on? What's going on in music?
Well, I'm glad you asked because February 74 is a big year. The 8th, we have two important albums. One is Here Come the Warm Jets by Brian Eno. And this is his first solo album after Roxy Music. It's brilliant,
Oh, it's super
as so
good.
much is. Um, and uh, it just goes under commercially. But
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, it's yeah. I mean, it's so Eno, right? I mean, it's
yeah,
just it's swimming upstream, but
not terribly accessible, but
not well, no, although more accessible than some of his stuff. But you're right. I mean, it's hard to see, extract a single from it, but it's magnificent as is most of his output in this era.
yeah. And the other album that comes out on this date that's worth talking about is Jolene by Dolly Parton. This is the album that really launches her into the stratosphere. After this point, it's almost impossible to do a country TV show without having Dolly on it. Um, and this is this is the start of her career as America's darling. She's so
Yeah,
wonderful. She's a
yeah,
wonderful person. But two big hits, Jolene and I Will Always Love You, both from this album.
yeah. Well, her marks her break from Porter Wagner, who gave her one of the people who gave her a start. Um, and she's going out as a solo. I think much to Porter Wagner's shock. I Will Always Love You is in fact, I think directed specifically at Wagner, but
Yes.
Jolene enters then sort of the Dolly Parton canon in the '70s. Then she will become not just an important figure on the country charts, but also then make a lot of crossover moves. And eventually she makes her way into, interesting, she makes her way into film as well, right? 9 to 5 and all that. So yeah, this is the start. So I have another something else on the 8th. So on the 8th on CBS is another show from Norman Lear. And this show, of course, is Good Times. And Good Times was radical in that it was set in a housing development in Chicago. It centered on a lower middle class black family. And it was, in its own way, sort of unflinching in terms of the way it discussed issues involving sex and drugs and coming up short in the month in terms of income and just, really the realities of daily life for so many people, whether black or white. It
I
starred,
think, yeah, sorry,
go ahead.
go
No,
ahead.
go ahead. No, you go ahead.
Well, I think it's a shame because this show had so much promise, and then it fell into the Fonzie trap with Jimmy
Well,
Walker,
this
and
is, I mean, right.
um,
With Jimmy Walker, who see here in the I guess I could say, what a bathrobe or something, but in the back there.
and Ron Howard had the clout and the pull with his company to say this is not going to become the Fonzie show, and Amos didn't have apparently didn't have the same
Well,
sort
right.
of
Well, so John Amos famously, the father figure right there in the middle, John Amos famously kind of quits and is, yeah,
because there's too much dynamite.
yeah, too much. But even with all that, and it really derails the show. There's not much question about it. But there is something that is, well, it's quite groundbreaking in its own way. This show takes on a number of issues, and it's still the era where you have black actors on American television in prime time. It's unusual. And so this will, it doesn't carry the same kind of cachet that All in the Family or Maude did. I think that's fair to say, but it was an important show and an interesting effort, and for a while rode really high in the ratings.
Do you think the Jeffersons
Hmm.
opened
Okay.
the way to that?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I don't think much. Yes, of course, absolutely. Yeah, and that needs to be mentioned for sure. But yeah, but um, the Jeffersons, I don't think were. I think good. Well, I don't know. They both were really, really popular shows. So there we have Good Times on CBS on the 8th. What else is going on in music or culture, Dave?
Well, a little bit later in the month, uh, we have on the 16th, the litigation is at an end between Grand Funk and their former manager,
Oh
Terry
my
Knight.
God. Oh my
It
God.
only
Yeah.
went on for 2 years, but in the end, the band gets to maintain its right to the name, and Knight takes a nice little settlement out of it. 2 days
It's
later,
yeah.
on the 18th, uh, a debut album, Kiss, by the band Kiss, New York City rockers, um, on a small
Oh,
label, Casablanca Records.
yeah. Tiny little label.
It
The little
was
label that
not,
the little label that could though, right?
yes, not a great commercial success, but
No, it was.
their
That's right. That's fair.
shows, their shows attracted attention, and it was just a matter of time until they became uh, rock superstars of the 70s.
They really changed a lot of things. Again, as you mentioned, their shows were events. They put a lot of energy into the shows, and they were really well. The showmanship and their attention to detail is got a lot of people's notice, including people who toured with them. Kiss notably had a lot of interesting opening acts, including Rush for a long time. And one of the things that Leifson and Geddy Lee both talk about is how how Kiss really delivered each night, how much, how serious they were about their craft. I had plenty of critics, but the other thing that Kiss did was they entered robustly into the world of merchandising in its own kind of crass way, but it opened the door for lots of other groups to pursue this. And I remember as a kid, just, I mean, Kiss posters and belt buckles and t-shirts were freaking everywhere. And yeah, this is Gene Simmons and um, Gene Peter Stanley and Gene Simmons. I guess kind of genius.
Paul Stanley.
Paul Stanley and Gene Simmons. They're yeah, particularly Simmons, but yeah. So it's and it was new. I mean, it was really pretty new, but they were very aggressive.
Well, I remember um, finding them derivative when they first came out.
Well, of course you did. In your yeah a budding Lester Bangs there in Dixon, Illinois or whatever. But
Now, this was back in Connecticut even.
oh well oh yeah your Tony New England days. Okay,
And
derivative you say?
well, I'm thinking of Alice Cooper with the whole
Well, I mean yeah.
uh,
Well
Mutt
yeah. I mean
Marshlock, and I thought, okay, so now there are four instead of just one front man, but it's essentially
well sure right. Uh, they don't really
I
have a
didn't hold
break.
it against them for very
Well,
long.
that's good. Well, yeah, that's good. They don't really, I don't, for me, I don't think they really have a breakout until Destroyer a few years later, but they're planting the seeds and they tour relentlessly. And so, they are, well, for example, I mean, I'm from Kansas and Kiss would come through Kansas, Wichita or Kansas City or whatever every year. I mean, without fail for decades. So they were road warriors and it benefited them in the end for sure.
Oh yeah.
I have something at the last of the month, near the last of the month, the
Oh, we're
25th.
not nearly there yet because
Oh, I'm sorry, Dave. I mean,
no,
cut you
no,
short.
we we have to talk about the fact that the American Music Awards.
Oh,
Uh,
geez.
took place
The Dick.
for the first time
Oh,
on
this is so
ABC.
much. Oh, this is so much crapahula. This is the Dick Clark business, right?
Just 2 weeks before the Grammys. And so they were able to be kind of a thermometer for what we could expect at the
Oh,
time.
a kind of thermometer, but it was all. Even then, it was kind of. It was very saccharine and sanitized, right? Or not?
And
Maybe
and and
I'm
and,
cutting them short.
and who won the best female and male vocalists? Uh,
The first one I don't know.
well, they're not surprises. Helen Reddy and Jim Croce,
Oh, okay. All right.
also
Okay.
pos posthumously.
Yes. Right. Right. Right.
Right?
Um, well, Helen Reddy. Well, she's the consummate American Music Award kind of nominee or award winner.
Yes, yes, she
I
is.
mean, um, okay. Well,
The
there we
very
go.
next day, two important albums come out. One is Pretzel Logic
Oh,
by Steely Dan,
oh yeah.
and the other is Radio City, Big Star's
Big
second album.
star, the star-crossed big star, Alec Chilton's, Chris
Uh,
Bell. Yeah, they
and on
will.
the
They'll.
same day, Cher files for divorce after 10 years of marriage.
Well, if
That's
they had
all
it,
on February 20th.
well, man, I mean, more that's abundance of riches. The share business is it's amazing that their marriage lasted as long as it did, particularly given the public nature of their discord. It was as we've talked about
Well, they were
when
able
that
to sell that. I mean, that there's something about that
oh well,
when
they were, but
that's
it was also uncomfortable.
that's
Oh yeah,
bringing
they
money
were.
in. Uh,
I guess so. Yeah, Sonny had taken over I mean, Cher was essentially an employee of Sunny Enterprises by this point, even though Cher was the one who with the solo career and all of that. And so um, I mean, she writes about this, and as we talked about this for a long time. This is obviously a huge moment, but it was an economic piece of this as well that she was looking to kind of reclaim, well, you know, grab hold of her own career. It's a, yeah, Sonny and Cher. It's it's uncomfortable.
well,
It
and
just
that
is.
chapter of popular culture is now coming to a close.
There we go. I just wanted to say real quickly on the 25th of the month, then Time Life announces that they're going to start a new magazine, People magazine. And critics howl at the notion of a magazine delivered, fueled by, infotainment and celebrities and, kind of cleaned up gossip and all that. It's worth noting that people kind of outlasted all of them, right? I mean, life had largely evaporated by this point. Time will fade. Yeah, Sports Illustrated will become far, far, far less important, but people in its own way continues on. But
Yeah.
it was considered a bold, if not kind of audacious move in the publishing world. But it was very successful. So that's it for me in February.
Well, the next day, the 26th, again, we have two albums that, in their own way, are important. There's Badfinger by Badfinger.
Mhm.
This eponymous album was their sixth studio album, but it was the first on Warner Brother Records after their having left Apple.
Left Apple, yeah. They famously were, yeah, one of the Apple's chief acts, and there was fair amount of help from McCartney at various points along the way for Badfinger. But yeah,
And Harrison was also
yeah, that's right. Yeah,
on there,
to
and
produce it. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
um, but Apple was going through problems of its own,
Oh, jeez.
clearly, and that all had
It
repercussions for
it's
some of the artists.
yeah, oh, for sure. It's kind of remarkable Apple lasted as long as it did, and the fact that Apple lasted past the breakup. I mean, it's like really. I mean, it was just a few years, but it was a few years. And they're amazing in a way.
Well, um, when managers and lawyers stand to earn money on uh,
Well, all true.
picking off the corpse. It's going to happen.
Yeah, that's right. Apple too was a kind of it was an economic enterprise, obviously, as a business venture, but it also was a kind of vibe associated with it, right? And it was in kind of in keeping with the style, character, and all that of the Beatles themselves, the cheeky lads. And once they, once the bloom came off that rose, then I mean, Apple's days were numbered.
Um, anyway, there was also this was I think clearly past their prime as well. This was
Oh, yeah, I
on,
think that's right.
on their way out, way to they only made two albums for Warner Brothers, and that was it. Then that
Yeah.
year was done.
Yeah, they, a band again. This is well chronicled, right? With a lot of
Talk,
internal dissension
yeah,
problems,
talk
and
about star-crossed. Oof.
oh well, it doesn't get much more star-crossed than
No,
Badfinger. Yeah,
not
that's for
really.
sure. That's for sure.
And then we have somebody who's just getting their start. Um, Debut album from Donna Summer, Lady of the Night. And this was only available in Netherlands, only released in the Netherlands.
Well, she was living in Germany, I think, at this point, right? She's essentially European. I mean, during this era,
But she was
it's
also active. I mean, she sang backup on Three Dog Night album.
that's all true, right? But she was she's really interesting. Yeah. So this is the
In,
start of Donna
in
Summer.
terms
She
of
will be
lifestyle and preferences and so on, yes, European.
absolutely,
Yeah.
yeah. And it's but this is where it begins. I mean, she will become, my Lord. I mean, Donna Summer in the
Miss
mid to late
Disco.
sex. I mean, it's just enormous, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Just enormous. Yeah, it's really
And so
something.
this is the first little tender seedling.
There we go. Tender seedling. Ah, that's nice.
Also appearing in this month, Unborn Child, uh,
Oh man.
Seals and Croft.
Well, I mean, okay, to their credit, right? I mean, it's this is part of their ideology, long-standing, and they got plenty of advice not to do it, but they ignored that advice.
They looked at what
And
was going on in the streets, out on the streets, and they said, It's time."
yeah, I guess, yeah, I mean, right.
Love Song, Anne Murray,
Oh,
also appeared
I'm I'm
in
gonna start. I'm gonna
February.
start. And then there's always Anne Murray. You can always count on Anne Murray in the 70s.
Yes, you could. And Rock and Roll Animal, Lou Reed's first live album. Um, and the first album, maybe the first album that he's done since leaving the Velvet Underground that's a little bit interesting. Uh,
That's not true, but but maybe a little bit more accessible,
it adds
I
guitarists
guess.
like Wagner, Steve Hunter, and they take a new kind of an edgier hard rock approach to some of the Velvet Underground songs. Um, and
Yeah, it's
some young folks that weren't around when Velvet Underground was doing their thing get exposed to some of
well,
that for the
this is
first time.
considered one of the great albums in the Reed canon. Rock and Roll Animal is a big thing, and people who are true believers for Lou Reed really look to this album. Yeah, strong in its own way.
So that's it for me
All
from
right.
February.
So, what's happening in early March, Dave?
March 1st, Grand Funk, Shining On is released. On the 2nd, a couple weeks too late to be really relevant, the 16th Annual Grammy Awards,
I
presented in LA, hosted by Andy Williams, who's also going to come out with
have to. Okay.
the Way We Were album this year.
Yeah.
Of course he is.
I. Oh my God, this is so interesting how the Grammys are always a little late to the party. It's 1974. It's not
It's
1960.
1974.
It's not 1964. And
Yeah,
and Andy Williams.
Andy Williams. Yeah,
You know.
we
Oh my
both love
God.
Andy Williams. right?
Oh, we do. We do love
But
Andy Williams, but Andy Williams should not be hosting the Grammy Awards in
no,
74.
no, it's a little bit like Bobby Vinton
Oh,
getting the top 10 in
yeah,
1970.
without the edge. I mean, it's just, I mean, right, Andy Williams. I mean, you're right. It's, oh God, that's incredible. That's incredible.
Do you remember who won the Album of the Year award? Okay, you can name the artist, I'm sure.
Hmm. Oh, it's got to be Stevie Wonder.
It's got to be Stevie Wonder, right?
And I can't, no, I won't be
Intervisions.
able. Intervisions, of
Intervisions. It's
course.
the album.
Well, it's always Stevie Wonder.
It's
The
always
only
Stevie
time
Wonder.
the only
Yeah.
time he doesn't win is what that year that he doesn't release an album. But yeah, Intervisions. Yeah, Stevie Wonder. Oh my God.
Um, Roberta Flack
Sure.
for Killing Me Softly with his
Oh
song,
yeah. Yeah.
both Record of the Year and Song of the Year. And Best New Artist. Take a stab.
Give me like a, I don't know, take a
Female.
stab.
Female.
Solo?
Worked with Barry Manilow.
Oh, Bette Midler.
Bette Midler.
Yeah. So,
Best New Artist.
or as Bet would say, he worked with her, right? But I mean, but it's interesting,
Yeah.
right? Because Manilow's just goes, I mean, takes off like a rocket. But yeah, Bette Midler, yeah, she had that very interesting album that had three singles on it. Yes, Bette Midler, Force of Nature in that era, straight from the bathhouses, Divine Miss M,
That's right. That's right.
a little too hot to handle, actually, in this era.
Kind of the 1974 version of Chapel Roan, maybe. Uh,
Wow. I
oh, there you
mean,
go. I'm not, I'm hip.
you're hip. You're
I'm
hip.
hip.
I didn't know Chapel Roan was there we go. Yeah, it's like that. I think that's right. Yeah. And so the new artist. Well, see, there you go. I mean, the Grammys redeemed themselves. What if Andy announced that?
Oh, he
Probably
may
not.
have.
I have something from the sixth that
Oh,
will
well, you're gonna have to wait, buddy. It's because
wait a minute.
on the third, Elvis Presley plays two shows at the Houston Astrodome and breaks attendance records. 44,000 at the evening show alone.
You
Oh,
know, oh yeah, yeah. This is of course the handiwork of Tom Parker. The and this is Elvis in the era where it's where this kind of
Elvis Live
scorekeeping.
was just a really, really hot ticket in the
It
early.
was a hot ticket, and the bigger the venue, the better. Um, and yeah, I mean, this is not a great creative period for Elvis, but he's still incredibly popular.
He's a big draw. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
On the
Um,
fourth, ABBA comes out with Waterloo. That's released on the
Now
fourth.
released. So this is pre-Eurovision, Abilene? This
This
is
is,
pre-Eurovision Waterloo, or is this post what?
boy,
I'm not trying because it feels like Eurovision is sort of in the spring.
yeah, this is very strange because, as you said, I would have thought the album would come out after that on the strength of their win, but Eurovision is later this year, and this is the year that they win it.
Yeah, yeah, I mean right, and this is where they take the Europe and the world by storm. Well, it's interesting.
Yeah, may have to double check that, but for the moment, let it stand. Waterloo, ABBA.
All
Uh,
right.
uh, but
Well,
but you were saying,
nobody likes coins and coin collecting like you. This is one of your great passions. And so in the United States on the 6th of March, um, the U.S. Mint announces bicentennial coins. So the bicentennial is a couple of years off, but bicentennial fever is already starting to build. And so I suppose the most popular of the bicentennial coins in terms of circulation was the quarter, the bicentennial quarter. The quarter had largely been unchanged for many, many decades. This actually gets the mint to become a bit more imaginative in terms of uh, coin and bill design. but this is where it starts. The bicentennial, and we'll talk about this down the road, but the bicentennial is completely embraced by Americans in a kind of a surprising way. That Americans could not get enough of history and of Revolutionary War lore and all of that in this era. And almost everything that is bicentennial related hits big. And the coins were, well, one such example.
An attractive coin too. It's well done.
I think it's well done. Yeah, I think so too. That's what I have from the sixth.
All right. On the 8th, we have Queen 2, which will be
Mm,
Queen's, it's their second album, but it's going to be the first of two albums in 1974. Um, and it does fairly well. Um, their single Seven Seasons of Rye is on that, and
yeah.
that's a top 10 single in the UK.
Yes.
Um,
Right.
the album reaches number 5 in the UK and number 49 in the US. There's a debut album as well on the 8th. Kansas comes out and with their album Kansas on the 8th of February.
And interesting you mentioned Queen and Kansas together because again, right down the road, Kansas would open for Queen and famously, right, Queen's uh, Brian May and Freddie Mercury would sit and listen to Kansas's sound check because it sounded so much like the Kansas records. It was they were one of the right, they were always very supportive of Kansas, but they're just getting started. And in the world of prog rock, Kansas is a big deal. I mean, they never had a lot of success on the charts in the US or anywhere else. But in terms of sort of the proggier side of things, lots of fans.
Yeah. Do you have anything before the 11th?
I do not.
Chicago 7th. 7 comes
Oh,
out on
that
the
has
11th.
that, yeah, the great album cover with the historical, like the city
Yes.
burning kind of
Yeah,
thing.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
That is kind of
yeah,
cool. No.
this has to be an album recorded at Caribou Ranch, just a guess, but
Just
it
a
can't be
guess. That's
just,
probably a safe guess, yes.
the studio that Chicago built, although they didn't know it. Um, God, that's still disappointing.
We may have to actually just do an episode of some sort
I
talking
we
about
never
Ranch
we never tired about talking about Caribou Ranch, but again, Caribou Ranch was famously constructed by
or Infamous.
their man or infamously by their manager Guerco.
Yeah,
Um, and
it
because
was a popular studio.
oh yeah, it was a very popular studio and lots of interesting music got recorded there, and and it was also a very popular kind of hangout. But again, famously, Chicago didn't really realize because I had looked at
Lots of snow
contracts.
all year round.
Lots of snow all year round. That's for sure. Um, eventually, Chicago pulls the plug on their relationship, but with the manager. But yeah, Caribou Ranch is.
Although, just real quickly, um, he's as responsible for their success as
I
anyone.
don't disagree. Yeah, I think
You
that
know,
that's fair. I mean,
so
they was yes. I
he
mean, it's
was ripping them off, yes, but
yes,
the
but
fact that they had something to rip off was largely his.
I mean, yeah. Well, yeah. So okay. I have something for the 16th.
A day after Chicago 7 comes
Oh,
out,
go ahead.
John Lennon, in one of the more
Oh no.
infamous episodes of The Lost Weekend,
Oh no. This is
was
gonna.
ejected from the Troubadour in LA
Oh, Doug Weston's famous night spot on the Sunset Strip.
with his friend Harry Nilsson,
Oh, Harry.
and got into a fight with a photographer who wanted apparently to have a picture of John Lennon being ejected from the Troubadour with Harry Nilsson. They had been uh, drinking Brandy Alexander's and heckling Tommy Smothers.
Yeah, this is the infamous Smothers episode. Yeah. I
And
mean,
that's the
if
thing
you're
I find so disturbing about that is Lennon and Smothers had hung out together. I mean, they
wasn't he part of the bed in Toronto or
yes,
something?
yeah, so there had definitely been at the very least, friendly vibes between them,
I
and then he
mean,
goes and
I
heckles the
would,
guy.
yeah, it's, yeah, but this, I mean, Lennon's an unattractive figure in this era. And, oh, yeah, the Lost Weekend is ugly. It's just, but it's
But
odd if you think,
very, very productive. My goodness.
yeah,
Yeah, well,
yeah, yeah, it is. Yeah, I mean, okay. For
I,
Lennon, for not for necessarily his hangers on, it wasn't great for Harry Nilsson.
well, Pussycat or whatever was considered. Well, it's in the top 74 albums of 74, if you ask Rolling Stone.
Hmm. Okay.
Well, that gives me a nice little segue because on the 15th, two more albums that are in the top 74 albums of 1974 were released. One was Get Your Wings by Aerosmith,
Yep.
and the other was Pure Smoky by Smokey Robinson. Man, that
This
guy's just
is
a ton of talent right there.
Yeah, that guy's Sans the Miracles. Yeah. Smokey Robinson was not the love. I have something for the 16th.
All right, let's hear it.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, let's travel to Nashville, where we will now go to the brand new Ole Opry Complex. And I
In
think you know
Opryland, USA.
Opryland, USA. Listen, yeah, and so where we get the chance to hear the president um, play
Uh,
three songs: "Happy Birthday," "My Wild Irish Rose," and "God Bless America." You know, so Nixon is, we haven't mentioned Nixon yet. What's happening? Yeah, so Nixon is in political free fall because of sort of everything that's happened. We'll talk a little bit more about him in a second, but he's looking for a friendly audience where he can find one, and he finds one in Nashville. He finds one at the Grand Ole Opry, a famously conservative venue for, I mean, it's always been conservative. Ask the Byrds about their welcome at the Opry, but Nixon is he's just interesting. I mean, he's just this bundle of contradictions, but he's a kind of ham, and so he loves it. And so he is the piano and bangs it out, and there's a kind of they kind of accompany him rudimentary here. But this will be, in a way, sort of his high watermark for the year. It's all downhill from here, really, for Nixon. But on the 16th, he can do no wrong at Opryland.
2 days later, from the Great White North, we have the eponymous album Rush coming
This
from
is with
Toronto.
Yeah, so this is with Rutsey on drums. So John Rutsey is still
Right. Uh, Neil Peart is not part of the band yet. Um, and I think most Rush fans will agree. Well, if you're a Rush fan, you probably think Neil Peart is the best drummer that the world
well,
ever.
sure. I think that's right. I think that the only criticism that Rush fans would throw at Rush regarding the whole Rutsey era is that he wasn't mentioned at the Hall of Fame induction ceremony. He only records one album with them. He steps away from the band. He had health issues, um, among other things. But yeah, so this is the working man LP. Famously gets that boost right from a DJ. Geez, maybe a DJ in Cleveland, who gets a copy of the record and plays the hell out of it. But this is humble beginnings for Rush for sure.
They uh, they begin their first North American tour opening for Uriah Heep.
Yeah.
The album peaks at 105, and some people note a Led Zeppelin influence.
Oh yeah, I think
I
that's fair. Yeah, yeah,
I
I
don't
think
I don't
so.
see it so much, but the comment has been made. So
Yeah. It is the because without Peart, who eventually begins to write all the lyrics or most of the lyrics,
yes, yes.
it does really stand apart from the group's other output. It's a very unusual album in that regard. I have something for the 23rd.
Well, on the 22nd, however,
Oh, there we go.
On the Border comes out by the Eagles.
This is the third album.
I believe that's correct.
This is not a Glenn Johns album. It's a Simsic. I think this is or did Glenn Johns start this? then
I think this was the album where they made that break.
yeah, Simzik I think produces this. Yeah.
Uh,
Um,
who had also been working with Joe Walsh.
yes, and I think that's yeah, and that's right. Is this yeah, this is a far well, more there's more rock on this album than the first two albums.
Yes, yeah, and that was the thing with Johns is that he said you guys want to be the Who and you're not.
Yeah.
So what's this rock stuff? Stick with what you stick to your lane.
Yeah, stick to your lane. Yeah, with yeah, country stuff, vocal harmonies. Nobody sings like you all. Just let that's and they were deeply unsatisfied with that response.
Well, and rightly so. Those guys were not
I don't know.
listening. Oh yeah,
I I don't know. Is
the
that
Eagles
right?
are,
I mean,
are a great rock band.
they're okay. I think they're an okay rock band, and I think they're a great country rock band. But I know this is not. I mean, this is not what they want to hear. But
Well,
okay. But this is the start. This is a real transition.
when it comes time
Um,
to hang out with the survivors of the band, I guess we know who they're going to pick between the two of us. I'll tell you
Probably.
here.
Yeah. Well, but it's and is this still the four-man group? When does Feldner join? Is he joining on this? Is he on here?
Boy,
I know he's on.
if I had known it was going to be the Spanish
I no no.
Inquisition on the
Well,
border, I would have prepared a
this
little bit.
Spanish. No one prepares for the Spanish Inquisition. Um, or it's a surprise. Yeah, I can't remember. I don't know. Sorry, but it's a fine album. It's a better album than
18th
the first two
album,
albums.
the 18th album of Frank Zappa appears on the same day. Apostrophe.
Uh,
It's his most successful album. I mean, Zappa was never particularly commercial.
Really, it's more successful than Freak Out or like Joe's Garage or something.
It reached number 10. Well, up until then.
Okay,
Up until then, it reached number 10
so
on the US
that's in,
album
that's
chart.
in, that's impossible. A Frank Zappa album getting to number 10 in the 74?
Very strange, yes. And
That's
especially because
amazing.
commercial was like an obscene word for Zappa. Um,
Yeah. Oh
yeah,
yeah.
but an edited version of the song "Don't Eat the Yellow Snow"
Yep.
becomes his highest charting single at
What's
number 86.
okay. The only thing that would rival, I mean, it's not his single, right? But his daughter, the Valley Girl, which
Valley
isn't his
Girl.
single, but he engineers it. And,
Yeah, Valley Girl is
Don't
good.
Eat the Yellow Snow. Yeah, Zappa is that's interesting. Gets it all the way to 10. That's shocking, actually.
Wow, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
I have something for the 23rd. It's from the world of sports. In NCAA basketball, for years and years and years, there was only kind of one name, and that name was the University of California at Los Angeles, UCLA. In fact, by the time we're getting to 1974, UCLA, the UCLA men's team had won 7 consecutive national championships and had won 38 consecutive tournament games. This goes, so on and on and on and on. They played upstart North Carolina State in the semifinals. North Carolina State led by David Thompson, who you can see here in the image. You could jump out of the gym, and North Carolina State then defeats UCLA and slays the dragon, and then goes on to win the national championship. But the dominance that UCLA had in this era is unprecedented, and well, I don't think we'll ever see it repeated. But to win 7 national championships, I mean, it's just like
That's outrageous. Yeah.
consecutive. That's outrageous. And as I recall, there was, I mean, this probably wasn't the case in Southern California, but there was a kind of appetite around the country to see UCLA come up short. And so North Carolina State became sort of the people's champion. There's not much
Sure.
question about that. So that gets me through March.
Well, just a few more interesting things. Right at the end, March 31st, my mother's birthday, um, Phil
All right.
Spector uh, is badly
Oh,
injured in a car accident in Hollywood.
oh. Nostalgia.
And that's going to uh, that I'm not sure what the connection is, but Lennon was putting together an album of covers with
Oh,
Spector
this,
of
yeah, this
old.
was this, yeah, is this the rock and roll? What would be become the Lennon rock and roll thing? Yeah.
Yeah, maybe this was what ended that. Maybe it was the really erratic behavior of Spector um, before that. I don't know. I don't know the details of the story, but anyway, uh, Phil certainly didn't go on to produce anything more in this year. We also have Slow Dancer by Boz Scaggs, Seven by Bob Seger, Mighty Love by the Spinners,
Hmm.
another one of the top 74 albums according to Rolling Stone of the year, and Hollies, the Hollies. This is the second Hollies album that's eponymous, the second Hollies album that's called Hollies. You just kind of have to know by context which one you're dealing with. I think this one has,
Does this have Air That I Breathe,
I think this is the Era That I Breathe album. Yes.
which is an Albert Hammond song, right? Do I have that right?
Oh, I think you're right. Yes, now that you say that, that is right. Uh,
So that's a great that's a great song.
yes,
It's
it
a
is.
terrific performance.
Oh
Yeah, the
man, the
Hollies.
performance is just incredible. Yeah. So,
All right, so
that wraps
what?
up the month.
All right, so
March.
let's take us to April. So what do you have? I have something for early April, but what do you have early April?
On the third, the Billy Preston live album, live European tour comes out,
Ah, Mr. Preston,
and
nothing from nothing.
this is the peak time for Billy Preston. Just about everything he touches turns to gold.
Well, an incredibly charismatic performer, right? I mean, what's not to love? I guess the one thing, I mean, Preston had a hard time loving himself, as we later learn, really bedeviled by lots of personal problems and image problems. But yeah, it's just at the peak of his game.
On the fifth, how far are you along?
Yeah, I got something for the fifth as well. So go ahead.
All right, on the fifth, we got several album releases. Secret Treaties by Blue Oyster Cult. Uh,
Oh yeah.
Another one of the 74 greatest albums of
Oh, this
1974.
is super. Yeah.
Um, Van Halen plays their first show on the Sunset Strip in Hollywood at Gazzari's.
Yeah, they had knockabout for a long time before a record deal and all of that. I mean, years. Um,
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
really quickly that, and maybe we'll attach this.
Well, sorry,
Uh,
sorry. When did Van Halen come out? Was that 77?
I believe that's 77. I believe that's 77.
So,
Summer of 77 or late spring of 77. Yeah, it's a long time.
yeah.
They had a long apprenticeship.
They're
A-
in the paying their dues phase right here.
Alex Van Halen is has written a biography,
I read that. Yeah.
autobiography, and is doing a has been doing tours talking about the Van Halen's early years. Super interesting. And one of the things that they saw themselves as becoming kind of kings of the Sunset Strip. They wanted that was one of the things that they really wanted to achieve. And he says in retrospect, it probably was a kind of mistake. They threw so much into, being the best band, on these clubs. And it's really interesting. I mean, a lot of bands go through this stage and they never get past it. They were managed to break out of it in large measure because they were able to get hooked up with Ted Templeman. But yeah, super interesting. The Van Halen story is it's Van Halen again, right? They come to the US, they don't speak English. It's so interesting that they very much are kind of this immigrant story. We'll have to link to this. Eddie Van Halen, before his death, a couple years before his death, gave an interview with the Library of Congress where he talks about his life as an immigrant kid, among other things. It is fascinating. I just never, for me, a real eye opener because I never really thought about Van Halen, Alex, and Eddie as these kind of this, story, kind of the American dream.
Yeah.
But very much are they very much saw themselves as a product of this, and in a country where we're sort of debating immigrants and immigration and all of that. I mean, my Lord. Think about the contribution that these two young immigrants made to the country and to the world. I mean, it's astounding.
One last thing for me on the 5th, Johnny Cash puts out Ragged Old Flag.
This has this has a little bit of pushback. A little
Well,
bit of pushback with the counterculture.
yeah, this is Johnny
He's his
Cash
own man.
was never afraid of pushback,
Well, that's
although
100%.
it was generally coming from the other direction.
Yes, well, that's very true. That's very true. Let me bounce this off you on the fifth then. So there's a high school English teacher in Maine who gets a book published, and things change dramatically for lots of people. That high school English teacher was one Stephen King, and the book is Carrie, which was published today by Doubleday. Um, this leads me. Uh, my dad was a teacher. Your mom was a longtime teacher, and there are lots of teachers in lots of high schools and middle schools across the country who have big, big dreams that maybe involve, maybe don't involve teaching. And Stephen King was not the only, has not been the only high school teacher to submit a manuscript to a publisher. Um, it's just interesting. Because his career just exploded, right? From Carrie. It just really exploded. And really for the past half century, he has been one of the most, maybe even the most well-read author in the United States. I mean, right? I mean, he's just like incredibly
I think
prolific
yeah,
and
that's
incredibly
plausible anyway.
successful.
Yeah.
And a lot of his movies, I mean, it's sort of hit and miss, but this movie, which then was this novel, which was released as a movie, I think 3 years later, was really quite striking, starring oh, help me out, Cece Spacek.
Yes.
But it's just this is had this novel not hit, or had it not sold, he taught English for the next 30 or 40 years. It's just one of those things. I mean, everything is happenstance and circumstance sometimes, but on the fifth. Stephen King doesn't have to teach English anymore because he's a published author and it's going to be incredibly, incredibly successful. Something for the sixth, real quickly. The sixth is Cal Gem 1. Cal Gem 1, held at the Ontario Motor Speedway. It will eventually, Cal Gem 2 will be held a couple of years later. There's a lot of good feelings surrounding the Cal Jam concerts. A couple of really interesting films. This Cal Jam 1 featured as some of the big names of the day, the Eagles, aforementioned Eagles, Deep Purple, and one Emerson, Lake and Palmer. But Cal Jam 1 is a huge, 250,000 people.
Yeah. Yeah.
It goes to show 5 years following Altamont that large scale outdoor concerts can be held in California without incident, largely without incident. So
Well,
there you have that.
was it a free concert?
I don't believe it was free.
It was probably not a free concert. Did the Hells
I but
Angels provide security?
I am certain that they were not involved in the planning or execution of this concert. They did not
Yeah.
have a security role.
See,
I
that
mean,
there are maybe some things that were learned at Ultimate after all.
Altamont mistakes were made. Yes, but there we have Cal Jam.
Well,
So
all
what
right.
what
On the same day, since we talked
there we
about it
go.
earlier, we referenced it. Was the Eurovision contest that ABBA won with Waterloo?
Eurovision almost defies explanation to people in the United States, but this thing's been going on for a long time, and it's wildly popular.
It's
It's been wildly
still
popular.
wildly popular, and that goes beyond my comprehension. But it is what it is. And there are people that just love it.
All right.
Um, Another one of the 74 best albums, Second Helping with Leonard Skinner.
Oh my gosh, yes.
And you talked about how Richard Nixon pretty much got a pass in the American South. Well, a famous line, Watergate does not bother me. Does your conscience bother you? From this album, second album.
Oh my God. Leonard Skinner is they're super interesting. Their lyrics, I mean, there's a lot there, right? Musicianship is incredible. It's great, one of the great kind of Southern boogie bands, all that kind of stuff, right? But there's a certain sophistication and a perspective point of view that's regional and that is, I mean, right. There's a lot there. It's a really interesting group from the beginning.
Oh yes, oh
Sec,
yes.
second
And
helping.
the interesting thing about that is uh, the meaning of Sweet Home Alabama, which sounds very, very redneck if you look at certain lyrics in a certain way. Um, Depending on who you ask in terms of who wrote the song in the band, you also get very different responses.
Oh
Well,
yeah.
yeah.
Oh yeah.
Do we love the governor? Is that boo 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 or so
Well,
yeah.
yeah, it's okay. I mean, they're bobbing and weaving a little, but it's yeah, but they had a point of view,
Oh,
even if they
and
didn't always
they were
acknowledge it.
a great fucking band. It was
Oh
just
yeah,
a
no,
great
terrific.
band.
No question.
So this is the second album, their second album, and that came out
Yeah.
on 15.
So there we go. So I have something for the 16th.
Okay, let's hear it.
All right, so the 16th. So there was a time in the United States when you would buy medicine and if it was in a bottle, you just twisted the cap and just opened it, and there would be no kind of plastic seal around it or no, second level of protection in terms of, it's covered. You just open it up and shake out the medicine. Well, after a number of scares, involving tainted or supposedly tainted medicine. The federal government then, on the 16th of April, institutes the mandatory childproof lids. These lids were, well, in their own way, kind of breathtaking in a sort of way. They were, again, you just push and turn, which seems to us very basic. But for many people, this was needlessly complex. And the concern was that you'd have people who were elderly or people who needed to get into medicine quickly. And so there were some medicines that were allowed to continue with the sort of the old-fashioned just twist off lids. But this is the entry into I don't know exactly how to term this, right? But there is this concern amongst consumers that our food and medicine might be tainted or that it's too easy to mess with. And so we need to create various kinds of barriers. And so the childproof lid is the first of these kind of protective barriers, and we'll see many, many more. But I remember this quite distinctly that we'd never had anything like this before, and that just the mechanics of how do you open this? You have to push it first was, in its own way, a little bit of a challenge.
And looking at this picture, push down and turn an arrow as to which direction you need to turn to open it. This seems really, really basic. Like, okay, we've got the
Yes.
stupidest possible consumer in mind
Well, I
here.
know. I bet this is
But I
right.
remember people talking about how the childproof, how they can't get childproof things open.
Yeah, yeah, it's adult proof
It's
too. I
adult
mean,
proof too.
right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
it was when things are new, they're frightening and challenging. And again, the childproof lid for many people was like, oh my God, this is just so complicated. Why does life have to be this difficult? But there we go. Childproof lid introduced on the 16th of April.
Yeah. Also on the 16th of April, we have Queen's very first North American concert, where they opened
Hmm.
for Mott the Hoople in Denver,
Oh,
Colorado.
that'd been a good double bill.
How about that?
that's yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That
Yeah, it
pairing.
does. Yeah, it really
And
does.
it oh, it was in Denver, is that what you said?
It was in Denver. Yeah, that makes a lot
Hmm.
more sense than say the Jimi Hendrix opening for the Monkees sort of thing.
Well, most things do. Most things make more sense than
Or
that. But
or the Who opening for Herman's Hermits,
God almighty.
which also happened.
Yeah, these things happened. Oh my Lord. Yeah.
On the 20th, Bridge of Sighs comes out. Robin Trower.
That's yeah, Robert Trower had this album when I was younger. Yeah, very melodic and former guitarist for Procol Harum. Yeah,
Yeah, this would be the first of four gold records for Trower in the U.S.
yeah.
Yeah, after Procol Harum, he goes on to significant solo success.
Yeah. So yeah, I think that's fair. He sold a lot of albums, and yeah, had quite a following.
On the 20th, and we said we weren't going to talk much about singles, but I think this is worth mentioning.
Let's do.
TSOP, The Sound of Philadelphia by MFSB
Easy for
uh,
you to say.
reaches the number one on the Billboard Hot 100. Uh, Considered the first disco song to reach number one. Um,
Okay.
and because it was commissioned, composed, recorded, all for Soul Train, which debuted in October of '73, it's also the first television theme song of the rock era to reach number one.
Is that really? Huh.
And well, just one of dozens of fantastic songs coming out of Philadelphia in
Oh yeah.
the area.
Yeah, Sigma Studios, Philadelphia International. Yeah. Gamble and Huff, Tom Bell,
Gamble and Huff. Yeah,
in the
that's
booth. Yeah, it's amazing stuff.
on the 25th. Sad story. Pam Morrison, Jim Morrison's widow, was found dead in her Hollywood apartment from an
Yeah.
apparent heroin overdose.
I mean, yeah, that's a strange and sad tale.
Yeah, but on the 30th, are you familiar with Richard and Linda Thompson?
I am. Richard Thompson, right? Fairport Convention. They he leaves Fairport. Um, uh, Eventually marries Linda Thompson. They record a handful of albums that are very highly regarded. And then they record an album near the this isn't the one you're going to talk about, but they record an album in the midst of their marital discord, which is also I want to shoot out all the bright lights. I think that's from the early '80s. Quite a powerhouse duo.
Well, they on the 30th, they put out "I Want to See the Bright Lights Tonight," which I believe is
Oh,
their.
shoot out the lights. Yes, yes, right. Yes, that's I want to see. That's right. That's their hit. That's their.
I believe this is their first album that they made together for Island Records. Doesn't
Yeah.
sell well.
No, they none of them ever really sell, but yeah, but
It's
highly regarded.
mostly ignored by the critics, but it does find a place in Rolling Stone's top 500 LPs and in the Rolling Stones top 74 albums of 1974.
Yeah, I said. Yeah, the Richard Thompson's career has been like one that's just sort of bubbled under the surface for like a half century. But yeah, good stuff.
And as long as we're talking about disco, also on the 30th, Skin Tight by Ohio Players. Their fifth
Now,
studio album, but essentially their commercial breakthrough.
oh my Lord. So the thing that most will remember from this era about the Ohio Players albums are their covers. So in the way that
Like
what
Scorpion covers and
yeah, Scorpion or
Roxy Music.
Roxy Music or Carly Simon's
Oh,
covers. The Ohio Players covers album covers were, as they say, provocative. But uh, but yeah.
yeah. So Skin Tight. And that's all I have for April.
So what do you have for early May? I have one thing for early May, but what do you have?
On the 3rd, Rick Wakeman releases Journey to the Center of the Earth. Um,
Have you do you have that?
I don't.
I had that in high school. It is well, it's not subtle, but it's a tour de force, man. I mean, that guy just, I mean, he's letting it all hang out.
Okay. This is
It's great. It's great.
a little break from his work with Yes.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah.
On the fifth, The Kids and Me, Billy Preston, which he makes for some kids' home in
Hmm.
LA or something like that. I
Yeah.
mean, they get they're the beneficiaries of the profits for this. And we talked about this. One of his big hits, Will It Go Round in Circles? Or Nothing from Nothing. I believe
Nothing from
Nothing from
nothing.
Nothing comes from The Kids and Me.
Ah, cool. There we go.
Yeah.
I have something from the fourth.
All right.
The President of the United States, one Richard Milhouse Nixon, always interested in friendly crowds. Found one in Nashville a month earlier, but didn't find one in Spokane. There was a time, Spokane, Washington, that is. There was a time when World's Fairs were a big deal. That the cities would bid against each other, and the awarding of a World's Fair was significant, and the opening of a World's Fair was kind of national news. So on the 4th of May, Spokane, Washington, makes itself available to the world. And Richard Nixon is there to open the ceremonies of Expo 74. What's noteworthy about this, again, is that Nixon, at what would think to be a kind of an anodyne event, kind of sanitized, met with huge crowds of protesters at the expo, and the expo organizers and the Nixon officials were aghast at the number of people who were there booing him and what they were saying, and their signs, my friends, their signs. And I think it really was an inkling that there was going to be very few places that Nixon could ever appear in the United States where he was not going to get significant heat. And I'm not suggesting for a second that Spokane, Washington, and Expo 74, sort of tipped the balance for him. But it just was clear that this guy was wildly unpopular with
Yeah,
a
this was a
huge segment.
symptom of the uh,
Yeah,
Engelmann ladies.
and there was just no escaping it. And I'm gonna just throw this in while I've got the floor to about Nixon again on the 20th of May. John Sirica will order Nixon to give up the tapes, the famous tapes in the Oval Office that Nixon was hanging on to, admitted to having, but hanging on to. Eventually, Nixon, of course, appeals this decision almost immediately. The Supreme Court then on the 23rd will tell Nixon to give them up. And this is, I mean, that is the tapes of the smoking
Yeah,
gun,
yeah,
and that is
that's
that's it.
it's all over
But
after
Nick,
that.
the walls, I mean, clearly the walls were closing in on Nixon, and so
But
um,
even the fact that he did not want to release them after
well,
promising absolute transparency, we're going to get to the bottom of this, right?
I don't
Yeah, but you can't
I
have this stuff. Was not good optics.
I yeah, again, it's un I guess it's difficult to give Nixon advice. Um, but the advice he was getting, I mean, it was absurd, just absurd, and it just looks so damn bad. But yeah, the end was nobody knew when the end was, but the end was probably within sight,
Yeah,
and Spokane was part of that.
yeah.
What else do you have in May?
Well, we have Led Zeppelin on the 7th announces their new record label, Swan Song Records. Throws a lavish party at the Four Seasons Hotel in New York. Um, Knowing Led Zeppelin, that almost certainly degenerated into a debauchery and orgy. But that was the start of Swan Song. On the 10th, the New York Dolls released Too Much, Too Soon. Uh, and maybe it was too much too soon, but it was probably almost a little late for them. Um, they, they were
Yeah,
they were already more or less on their way out. as a group, um, but it attracted critical attention. It attracted a cult following, um, and it cemented New York Doll's place in rock and roll history, I think.
They are one of those bands that lots of people point to as being extraordinarily influential, but with very little, was almost not even nary a ripple of commercial success. I mean, even in the era, I mean, no one owned New York Dolls records, but looking back on it, it's clear that their approach to music and lots of things were incredibly influential.
The next bit I have to mention just because it's such a strange, strange incident that I have to relate it
All
after
right.
I found it. On the 11th, the New York Police Bagpipe Band performs shortly after midnight at the Portsmouth, Rhode Island Ramada Inn. This is in connection with the National Police Week event.
At the Ramada. Okay.
Yes, this prompts a drunken spree that lasts until dawn. At least a dozen off-duty members of the Boston Police Department run naked through the motel, smashing chairs, tables, soiling rugs, discharging
Soiling.
fire extinguishers, exploding firecrackers, setting off a burglar alarm, disconnecting a security camera, slashing
That way.
tires, and throwing pictures into the motel courtyard.
Boys will be boys.
The Boston police
Uh,
are responsible for this. The
not
police,
great.
they're not responding to this, they're doing it. Caused just over $1,000 of damage, including liquor stolen from a locked cabinet and unpaid breakfast bills. That was all.
Oh, on top of everything else. Didn't pay for the didn't it didn't pay for the scrambled eggs. Um,
Man, at that point, you're just glad to get rid of them.
oh my Lord.
You go.
Um, I I just wanted to mention late in the month, on the 26th, David Cassidy had a concert in London. And the concert was like all these concerts, chaotic. It was a huge crowd, mostly young women, many of them on the verge of a kind of hysteria. Anyway, the lots of shoving, something nobody's quite sure what happened, but the end result was 800 people were injured and one young girl was killed. And
It's
this
like that's like a Who concert.
yeah, it is like a Who concert, and this had a kind of this definitely had an effect on Cassidy who had an ambivalent relationship with fame to begin with, and really it stayed with him, I think, for the rest of his life in terms of sort of his approach to concerts. And yeah, it was bad news, and it's surprising in a way that this didn't happen more often, candidly. But yeah, this was on the 26th with Cassidy in London. It was a disaster.
All right, listen, I'm going out a little bit on a limb here in terms of the questionable taste of this comment, but
Oh, well, oh, good. Well then.
people can write in the comments.
Oh,
Don't you think that one of the perks of being a rock star
oh no.
is the groupies?
Oh, Dave.
No, wait.
Okay. All right.
But
All right.
if you're a David Cassidy or a Bobby Sherman,
Oh, this is
your
this is
groupies are
uncomfortable.
13 years old. You can't, they're
Well,
groupies that you can't touch.
we should tell that to Jimmy Page then, right? I
Yeah,
hear what you're
that's
saying.
that's a completely different chapter in terms of mm, uh,
Okay, fair enough. All right. So it when your base skews so young. Okay. Well, I mean
you're
these
kind
were
of
schoolgirls, yeah, for sure.
yeah.
Cassidy.
I would think that that would be one reason to be bitter or disillusioned about your career as a
Because
superstar.
you didn't have it because your groupies were too young?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, yeah, okay. Yeah. I don't even know how to. Yeah, man. It's awkward for sure. It's awkward. Um, do you have anything? I don't know where to go with this. Do you have anything else in May?
Yeah, in May, we have Diamond Dogs by David Bowie on the 24th.
Ah, Mr. Bowie. Yeah.
This was his eighth album, and it was his first after he cut Ziggy Stardust loose.
So
Um,
okay, and so and did he okay? In addition to cutting Ziggy Stardust loose, the persona did let loose the Spiders from Mars?
well, I assume because that was Ziggy Stardust's band. So if Ziggy is dead,
Okay, so
um,
Ronson's not and all that. No. Okay.
yeah, I think that's fair to assume. Lead single on this was Rebel Rebel, of course. Fantastic. We've already talked about that single
Oh, it's
fairly
great.
extensively. So
Yeah. All right.
this is considered his farewell to glam rock, Diamond Dogs.
Mhm. All right.
Fantastic album.
Yeah.
Bad Company had their debut same day. And I don't know if Bad Company ever made a bad album, but it certainly did not start with their debut and the
I
few albums that they put out.
I totally agree. We are on the same page with this. We've made this comment before. Why aren't they in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame? Those
Yes,
albums are great
man, they're just
from
some really, really solid.
start to finish. Those albums are great. Yeah, they eventually hook up with the Zeppelin Swan Song imprint. Um,
Yes,
but
that's
uh,
right. Yeah.
but yeah, they are born from the ashes of Free. Yeah, that's a terrific band, and those are great albums, no
That's
question.
also on the 24th. On the 25th, I mentioned it earlier, 20 years after it was recorded, Rock Around the Clock returns to the Billboard Top 40, thanks to the success of American Graffiti and Happy.
Well, and you think about all those performers that yeah, that they all benefited. They all had a second bite at the cherry or whatever in that era. These oldies
Right.
circuits would go on forever.
Yes.
Anything else in May?
On the 28th, If You Love Me, Let Me Know, Olivia Newton-John is released. Also released, don't have dates for this, but Mr. Natural uh, by the Bee Gees. And
Oh, you are a completist. Mr.
Rags to,
Natural.
Rags to Rufus. Uh,
Oh.
Also one of the 74 top albums of
Oh,
1970.
it's a big, yeah. Rufus is, and they're smoking. That's really
Yeah,
something. Um,
that's it then
okay.
for
I
me.
I have something. I have something for the 1st of June, just a couple different
All
things.
right.
First of June, the thoracic surgeon, Harry Heimlich, in an article, wrote about a procedure that he thought would be useful in helping people from choking.
And he was
And so it's
right.
and he was right. It's hard to think about this, but there was a time when there wasn't the Heimlich maneuver.
Yeah.
And it has
It
proved
just
to
seems
be,
like one of those things that should have been around as long as medicine. But
I totally agree. But so there really was a Heimlich and Dr. Heimlich and all that. But Henry Heimlich then suggests this thoracic kind of, we all know the Heimlich. One of the things that made this very popular and well known, one is a very simple kind of technique, right? The other is that Heimlich would go on talk shows, including like Johnny Carson and stuff. And he was a famous and familiar guest in the mid 70s. But what's interesting about this, of course, is there's always naysayers, right? And so you have some people who thought Heimlich was sort of just kind of grabbing for the spotlight and all that. And there is even today some pushback regarding the Heimlich maneuver, regarding is this the best way to help somebody who's choking? But again, this guy saved lots of lives. And the procedure or the process or whatever you want to call it is very, very simple. But this is when the article um, hits hits the newsstand in June 1st of 74.
I actually applied it once.
I was going to ask you, is that right?
Yeah, and
Um,
it helped.
it helped. I mean, it works, and there have been lots of people like yourself who've been in a situation who've just used it. I have something for the 4th.
Okay, let's hear it.
Well, sometimes things get a little out of hand at the old ballpark, particularly when it's 10-cent beer night.
Oh my
So
God.
I mean, it's a long time
Yes.
ago, but 10 cents in 1974 was not that much money. So good grief. So somebody in the Cleveland Indians front office thought this would be a great promotion, and so on June 4th, the Indians were playing the Texas Rangers, and beer was 10 cents, and it all hell broke loose. And so there was ostensibly a riot as fans then, well, first for quite a while, were throwing beers at everybody on the field, but eventually then invaded the pitch, and they had to call off the game. The Indians were forced to forfeit, which almost never happens. There are only a handful of incidents in Major League Baseball history where there's been an actual forfeit, but this is one of them. Never again would the Indians or any other club experiment with cheap beer night. But honest to God, Dave, I mean, who thought this was a good idea? I mean, like, this is so totally kind of anticipated. This is like, but
Well, and
all hell broke
the
loose.
reasonable thing to do would have been to say, oh, 10-cent beer. We all love cheap beer. Let's let's make sure that this happens again. But you get
Oh,
a mass of people and you're not going to get the reasonable reaction. You're going to
no,
get
you're not going to. No, you're
the
not
most
going to.
irrational type of behavior that's possible,
That's what you
reliably.
got. That's
Reliably.
what you got.
Yeah.
So that gets us into June. So what's happening in music or culture and/or culture in June?
On June 5th, Sly Stone um, already passed the peak of his career, sadly. What a genius. But
Oh, I think that's right. Yeah, it really is.
he married the model actress Kathy Silva on June 5th, 1974, during a sold-out performance at Madison Square Garden. He married her
Yeah,
during
this is
during the
yeah, this
performance.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Also on June 5th, Patti Smith records "Hey Joe." It's her debut single and has been called the first punk rock single ever.
She's an important performer, right? I mean, she's an artist. She was living with the photographer Robert Mapplethorpe at the time. There's someone who, again, a bit like the New York Dolls, although she had more commercial success than the Dolls ever did, but
Yeah.
incredibly influential, and is considered today, I think, a kind of elder stateswoman
Oh yes.
for rebel causes writ large. Yeah.
Um, I'm not sure I made this clear, but this was recorded on this day. It wasn't released until August.
Yeah.
So that's the 5th. I have something for the 14th.
Yeah, go. I got something at the end of the month, so go ahead.
All
Yeah.
right. David Bowie launches his David Diamond Dogs tour in Montreal.
Hmm. Yeah.
And on the 15th, Back Home Again by John Denver is released.
Oh God. Well, I mean, I'm glad you noted that. With the title track, "Back Home Again." Ain't it good to be back home again? Oh my God.
Yes. Yes. Um,
Oh,
and on the 20th, um, they just started their tour at the beginning of the year, but Bob Dylan and the band have already put out their live Before the Flood. That is released on the 20th of June.
well, I mean, let's get to making. Let's get to recording and distributing process. Oh yeah.
On the 24th, well, we've already mentioned Caribou Ranch. Caribou, the album, is released by Elton.
Uh,
Also,
uh,
one of the top 74 albums of 1974, according to
well, that's
Kool.
okay. Well, all right, fair enough. You know, I
What?
mean,
What? What? What?
come on. It's one of the weakest albums he ever made. Well, but it's got two great singles,
Two great singles.
uh, and which is more than a lot of albums have.
That's true.
As- But the thing about John in this era was that his albums were just extraordinary. Every cut was, terrific, and that is not the case with Caribou. Eh,
Also on the 24th, the Beach Boys release a compilation, Endless Summer, a double album
Which is their this is the compilation, right? Beach for the Beach
Oh
Boys.
man, I think so. I don't know how you get a better one. It's fantastic.
I mean, it's considered one of the great kind of, well, it's one of the best greatest hits LPs. And I think lots of people, I mean, they may not own much Beach Boys, but people own Endless Summer or owned Endless Summer. Absolutely.
Has a great cover too. Just
It does.
mm.
Yeah, I totally agree. Um,
On the 26th, Holiday by America.
oh, it's an album that starts with H. Oh, that's good. This is a George Michael. This is a George Martin, not George Michael, the sports machine. George Martin produced that LP.
His first collaboration with America. Yes. Oh,
Yeah. I also have something for the 26th. And so we were talking about this a second ago. There was a time before, in the way that there was a time before the childproof lids and this kind of thing. Well, there was a time before universal price codes or UPCs when you went to the checkout and the cashier would have to simply type in um, the price. Well, those days, my friends, are coming to an end because
well,
the
thank
National
God.
Cash the National Cash Register Company has created something called the Universal Price Code. This is the first item ever sold with the UPC, is a value pack of Wrigley's Juicy Fruit gum. You can see the UPC code at the top, which then needed a scanner, and well, from there, right, the future is the future is there. They become well. This is the modern world of commerce. And there are, lots of advantages to the UPC code. One of the complaints, though, was the consumers wondering if, in fact, UPC codes would um, reflect the price, that they would thought they were paying. What kind of guarantee do you have? I don't see a price on here, and all this kind of thing. And I think that remains a concern today, actually. But this is when the UPC code was introduced. George Bush, the elder George Bush, famously, right, when he was on campaigning, um, it's either the late, I think it was for his first campaign, walked into a grocery store and talked about the amazing scanners and about the technology that like a technology that had been in place for well over a decade. But you have the UPC codes introduced at the end of June in '74, and well, the future is so bright we even need shades. Anything left in June?
Yeah. Let me just. I guess it's my turn to share. Here we have
Oh
the
my gosh, yeah.
the Acne concert. Uh, Kevin Ayers, John Cale, Eno, and Nico. Now, if I told you that the two gentlemen in the front uh, had been involved in an episode an incident in which the one discovers the other with the first's wife.
Hmm.
Um, Looking at this, can you tell
I
who was the discoverer and who the discovered?
I I am not
The night
100%
before, the
sure.
night before.
Mm, is it possible that Kale's wife was I mean that Kale was the party that was
Yes, indeed. Yeah.
it was his wife who was
So you're
involved. The
right.
guy
So this is John Cale, and this is Kevin Ayers, and John discovered Kevin with his wife, John's wife, the night before this picture was taken. Awkward.
yeah, awkward. Well, what an interesting I mean with that, I mean shoot, maybe that's in the liner notes. That would make that would
But this concert is known as the Acne concert for Ayers, Cale, Nico, and
oh
Eno.
I I see what they did there.
Yeah, right.
I
And
see what they
and
did there.
one concert. These people don't play with each other all the time, but they got together on June 1st, and this album was the result.
Okay.
Nico, of course, one of the singers for the Velvet Underground. Um,
Yeah, she was kind of in their orbit, right?
yeah, so it was not always part of their makeup, but often.
She also was in a relationship with a young Jackson Browne, and Jackson Browne was involved in the recording of her first album or two. So yeah,
Interesting. Okay.
died a young woman. Um, what else do you have for June?
I don't have a specific date for this, but Jimmy Cliff came out with Music Maker,
Okay.
which was released in June, and Grateful Dead was one of the 74 best albums of 1974 from the Mars Hotel. That was on the 27th.
All right, there we go.
There we
All
go.
right, so that gets us through June. So Dave, why don't you take us home?
Well, be happy to do that. If you enjoyed this video, we hope you did. Give us a thumbs up. If you're not subscribed to Steve and Dave's yet, you can do that right here. You'll definitely want to listen to our playlists. We're going to be sampling from all the things we've talked about here. That's right here. And we will, of course, finish talking about 1974, July through December. And we will post that right here.
Yeah. Keep in mind, right, that we every day we're posting new material on Blue Sky. So Stephen Days One at Blue Sky. It's interesting stuff. We encourage you to check it out. And so until next time, we'll see you soon.
Bye bye.